Hey folks, thanks for joining us for another episode of the Marketing Share podcast. It's great to have you back. It's great to be back in 2024 where we're doing our first recording of 2024. So Happy New Year, everyone. One of the things that we like to do on this show, of course, is bring in guests to talk about particular areas of expertise because our goal is to help marketing leaders know what they need to know and to run marketing. But the other thing that we also like to do is talk about successes and bring on guests who have been through the gauntlet, have led marketing before, and can talk about what it was like. Because I think you get a lot of learnings from that as well. So that's going to be another one of our episodes today. That's what we're doing today. We're doing another one of our success stories. We've got someone, and Barb, you're going to introduce, right? Someone that is here to kind of share their experiences. And I think this is going to be another great conversation. Before I get into that, I just do want to have our listeners say, first of all, thank you for tuning in. If you like the show, please do follow us or hit subscribe. That really helps us out. I also want to give a plug to our digital support and our graphic design people over at Socialize Video. They do all of our post-production behind the scenes. So if you need any video support for your marketing or podcasting, please go check out Socialize Video. They're at socialize.video. All right, Barb, let's introduce our topic and our guest today. I'm gonna let you intro Mike.
Right. I'm excited about our success series because, come on, let's face it. There's not much that can top taking an idea from idea stage, notion to notable, right? Taking something from an idea and a concept and actually bringing it to life. And that's what we're going to kind of go into today. And there's a fast moving world of venture-backed healthcare and technology startups and sectors. And that can be super exciting. But let's face it, on the flip side of that, it's about making an impact and creating that early stage engine that gets you from 0 to 1, whatever that is in your business, right? So today we have a great guest that we have as part of many contacts that we work with CMOs for. But Mike Harmon is a 4X founding level marketer for venture-backed tech firms. And he has a consultancy called Hard Tech CMO, which helps early stage companies do exactly that, go from 0 to their first levels of success. Because as you said in your description, Mike, you can't have big headlines if you can't get from those first stages from 0 to 1, right? So that's what you're going to kind of talk to us. And welcome to the show.
Thanks, Barb. Thanks, Alec. It's great to be here with you today.
So tell us a little bit about your story. It's pretty exciting. I love to hear stories about people who make successes in early stage companies. So walk us through some of your career journey and tell us some of your success.
Sure. I sort of fell into marketing as a graduate of a journalism program in the mid-90s, and I was studying communications, and one of the emerging technologies there was obviously the web. And so I got really smart on how that stuff worked, and that turned out to be a pretty desirable skill set for folks in that point in time. And so in some ways, marketing sort of chose me in that regard, and I started having opportunities to work with. I was in charge of a large brand at the time, RCA Electronics, and was responsible for taking those products and services and putting them online. So got to do some really interesting promotions of really, really early things that we now take for granted and seem almost like relics, but that kind of is where it all started. And so this interest in technology, and particularly technology that is groundbreaking and driving impact. That's why I'm focused now on deep tech and hard tech these days, is I just really am interested in those things. And in my career journey, I've had the opportunity to bring some things that didn't exist before to market. So it's been a really exciting career for me. When I haven't been doing the marketing stuff, I've served as a consultant. which is kind of where I find myself now as well. I did spend a decent amount of time. One of the technologies that I got really excited about in the early 2000 timeframe was CRM. And so put our company that we'll talk about here in a little bit on Salesforce in 2000, back when it was just a Salesforce automation thing. And I kind of saw that that was something that you needed to be paid attention to and was going to drive a real impact in businesses. And that still is foundational in the work that I do right now. So I had a good consulting practice around CRM. And then I did spend a little bit of time in the social sector as a CEO of 2 nonprofits in my hometown of Indianapolis.
Love it. Love it. Now, you talk about some of your horizontal business experience. Walk us through some of those experiences as you kind of bring those forward.
Yeah, so you mentioned that I've done this 4 times before. And when I think about the differences and similarities between the business, I sort of think about them in terms of, are they a vertical business? Are they really focused on a specific market, a specific industry? Or is it more of an enabling technology that can be applied across many, many different industries? And so the first 2 that I did were vertical. And I can go into those if you like, and then talk about the horizontal. I wanted to make sure everybody kind of understood where I was coming from on that.
Yeah, just explain a little bit by what you mean by vertical versus horizontal. I think most people might know, but let's just be clear about that.
Yeah, so the vertical is like, I know the industry, I know where we're taking this. The 2 that I was involved with that I would characterize as vertical would be event technology. So we created a solution specifically aimed at brands that were spending a lot of money who at events, but they weren't able to really connect with people. And we built a technological platform that helped them do that and understand who the people they were influencing at events were. And then the other one was a DNA test specifically for prostate and breast biopsies. So those markets were really knowable. I could tell you who the event marketing firms were. I could tell you what brands were spending the most on event marketing. I could tell you the top, urology practices in the country and just go, right? And it's still hard. Right, but it's not as hard as the other stuff. The horizontal programs that I was working on, the 2 that are the most recent. One is a technology called SpokeNote, which made some cool news this week, doing an interesting partnership with the Indiana Pacers and actually having their QR codes on their jerseys. Something I started with the soccer team there, and their product, their technology, is the ability to attach a video to a QR code that's been printed. And whatever that application is, it could be a piece of direct mail. It could be a sticker that you attach to a birthday card and you want to sing somebody happy birthday. It's a really interesting and versatile technology. And it's almost like, in some ways, almost too versatile, right? There's so many places you can take it. And so, that actually ends up being one of the challenges of these enabling technologies is like, where do you focus your limited resources initially so that you can get traction and then maybe invest in some others as those opportunities go? The other horizontal technology that I work with, horizontal business, is based in Chicago, which is near where I live now. And that's called New Current. And New Current has been New Current has been around for over a decade. I joined as the first full-time marketing person there, working directly with the CEO. And we had at the time, I think it was probably around 30 or 40 patents in wireless power. That's the specialty of this company. They build wireless power subsystems. So like, your phones, if you do Qi charging on your phone, it's similar technology to that. There's now wireless charging embedded in like Polycom's headsets, and you're seeing it a lot more and more. And a lot of that technology is being powered by New Current. But the challenge with that is that this is like, there's so many different categories of products where this technology could apply. And there's also different modalities of wireless charging technology. Some of them are for distance, some of them are for really up close, some of them include data. And so you have to do this very complex, if a vertical business is checkers, this horizontal business was three-dimensional chess, right? Because you had to understand the modality of the wireless power, the nature of the products. Could it get embedded in that product at a cost that could still allow the manufacturer to achieve their price point? Would they take a license of that technology? So it was extraordinarily complex. But the technology was great. They now have over 300 patents. We were recognized as one of the most innovative companies in electronics by Fast Company, and recently a Deloitte Fast 500. So really cool journey there.
Very cool. I think I'm tracking with you now, right? The horizontal versus the vertical. And you're exactly right. When you are CMO or marketing hire number one in an organization, you really do transcend and you become almost like a consultant for the business, don't you? Right. So with these big immersive products that could go to any single market, you really have to determine where you play first, right? On some of those horizontal plays. How do you do that?
It's so difficult. And it requires either, there's a couple ways you can do it, right? You can raise a bunch of money and go after all of them, which I haven't been able to do yet. Or you have to actually stick your neck out and make some big bets and really force your limited resources in certain areas. And one of the places where we did that successfully at New Current was, you're probably familiar with NFC, tap to pay technology. Well, we got really smart and really good and developed some technology around using NFC as a wireless charging vehicle. And we were on the front end of that. And so, like, I've got my Whoop strap here. I don't know if you're familiar with that product, but the charger for the Whoop strap actually uses NFC charging technology developed by New Current. Funny marketing geek story on that is the way that relationship started was outbound email. We found the director of engineering, cooked up a good value proposition. We assumed that they were trying to seal the device so that people could wear it in the shower and things of that nature. And that we were exactly right, because our technology allowed them to seal that device and eliminate a connector that was causing problems for them.
I love that. Right, an example of how using any technique. Right, a lot of times outbound email is kind of frowned upon or looked down upon, but it can be effective, as we've talked about in other episodes here on the Marketing Share.
It's all about the value proposition, right? If you just hammer somebody with something that's generic, but I mean, like, one of the things we did regularly when we were trying to, bring this very small company that not many people had heard of with really cool technology. I mean, we would read their 10K filings. We would read documentation that was publicly available and scour that. And one of the things that we found when we were looking at a number of technology companies as we did that was that these connectors were one of the biggest points of failure for these companies. So, we started out and, nobody gets it right out of the jump, but we started out like, hey, we've got wireless power. Do you want some? And people were like, I don't know, maybe. But then when you say, well, okay, we can get rid of this thing. We can get rid of this connector and seal this device. Would you like that? And that changed the conversation. That changed the game. And immediately we were now operating from a position of, we're no longer this fanciful, enabling technology. We are a problem solver.
Yeah. That's one of the great things I think about working for smaller companies and startups or scale-ups. You really get there's an opportunity to do some truly strategic level thinking in marketing. It's not. I mean, people kind of might assume that, oh, you're the marketer. Okay, so you're just coming in and you're thinking about branding or lead gen. I mean, that's all part of it. But if you want to make an impact, sometimes working for a startup is where you can really do some high-level strategic thinking that it's way more than just marketing, so to speak. It's really about getting the business off the ground, right? Isn't that? And I think that's what the examples that you give to me say that.
That's a really interesting perspective because I don't know in the roles that I've had, I don't know how to separate strategy from marketing. They are inextricably linked. In fact, so is sales, right? I mean, like, and that's where I think about this whole sort of bridge of commercialization. When I think of 0 to 1, I do not think of strategy. I do not think of marketing and sales as these independent, siloed things. They are completely linked and essential supports of one another. So it's interesting that you bring that up in that way. It's like, I don't know how to do it any other way. And it's just sort of the nature of being in, companies at this stage. I'm aware that there are marketing departments out there that just do marketing. But if, and you're right, if you want to start to see, do you have some of these strategic muscles to flex, or do you want to learn how to develop those? Working with, supporting, even just shadowing within a startup is a great opportunity to kind of test that out.
Yep. It's because a lot of times people say, hey, I'm a strategic marketer, or, I like doing marketing strategy, but sometimes it's hard to actually explain to someone what that is. Like, what is, like, if you say, oh, I do brand, okay, people kind of understand that, or I do lead generation, okay, that's very concrete. But I think you're giving some really great examples of what it really means to be a strategic marketer. You've got to think about how to commercialize the business and figure out what market to go after, right? You like you said, you don't have endless resources. So you may have something that could work for a bunch of different problems or markets or segments, but you got to decide which one to go after and which one to kind of to go after first, or to put all your efforts on first and to try to get that momentum spun up.
Exactly. One of the ways that we did that in both of the horizontal groups that I was mentioning was this idea. There's a really novel tool in the startup world called the Lean Canvas business model. And it's basically a one-sheet piece of paper that helps you kind of assign your company product within a market. And there's 10 different categories that you suss out as you're looking at this. And so we actually did lean canvases using specific technologies and specific product types to really just kind of shake out what we were thinking about these things, to say where, and then prioritizing based on the strength of, how those, ended up. So there are some ways to do it. I'm not a Boston Consulting Group guy. I haven't been trained in that way. I'm sort of more of a scrappy, and sometimes creative, use the tools that are available to do a good enough job so that the people around the table are willing to say, yes, let's go, let's prioritize this.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I've used the Lean Canvas too, and it's a great tool for startups, right? Because many founders come from a different kind of discipline, right? And they need to have that kind of, who are we going after? What are we focusing on? And that's kind of, that tool helps you with that process. I loved it. So building from pre-revenue stage, I hear in your voice the way you actually talk and describe the product, which I think is sort of key to that. Any other pointers for marketers who are kind of walking into this field? I think you had a great piece of advice now, is stop thinking just marketing and think commercialization of the product. Is there anything else you might suggest to people entering that in? Because it really is a different world in startups versus maybe if you'd come from a corporate job, right?
Yeah, it is. And I think one of the things that I really learned over the series of doing these is just how much time I want to spend with customers. And I think that that's true, or ought to be true, with just about any type of business. But, there is just a wealth of perspective, of problems that you can mine out of conversations. And it's really, the hard part is just getting people's attention to take a moment and spend some time as you're developing this technology. And so I think having that curiosity and having that conviction to go and talk to people about this, and framing it up and saying, hey, we're still in this exploratory stage, but you have a role or a perspective, or you're responsible for a company or product, and we want your perspective. And somebody, I can't remember who it was that told me this, but it's just one of those things I always kind of remember is, is if you ask people for money, you get advice, and if you ask people for advice, you get money. It's not always true, but it's it just kind of helps you frame up the situation.
That was someone in venture capital said that. I've heard that too. I'm pretty sure it was someone in venture capital said that. So, one other thing that you said, Mike, which I'm just really glad to hear, curiosity. To me, curiosity is the one characteristic that I try to look for in a marketer, and I think it's what makes a really good marketer, because it's the thing that drives you to keep asking, the next question or to dig a little deeper, and it also gets you out of the walls of the company and talking to customers, like you said. And I think that's where you learn all the goodness. So my ears perked up when you said curiosity was one of the things that you advocate for. I love that. Okay, let's talk a little bit about some of the experiences you've had. Like, what was the toughest part about some of your growth stories? How long did it take? I think also that's another question that we often have as marketing leaders, right? Okay, we're about to join a startup, or we're coming in early. What's the time frame? What kind of, and it's different. Obviously, it's different in each case. There's no rule of thumb. But tell us a little bit about what it was like for you. What kind of time frames did you have? How long did it take? What were you, and how, maybe what it is how much time did you think you had, and what actually?
Yeah, and there's a lot about this, right? This is not something that anybody should ever go into lightly. Sometimes I've really have I done this 4 times, and I've got a couple of trophies and plenty of scars from the whole process. And I think one of the first things that I would advise people to do is don't just grab a startup. Grab something that you think is interesting. Grab something that you care about. Grab something that is has a mission that aligns with you. And because there will be dark moments, and it's because of that mission, or because of that curiosity, or because of that transformation that you're excited about, that kind of fuels you through the challenges. The wins, when things are going good, when you get that customer, or you get that proof of concept or PO or whatever, like those sustain you for a while. But when you're just getting clobbered, and you will get clobbered, I'm just not going to sugarcoat it. Aligning with that mission, aligning with that is really, really something that I encourage people to do. So, in all of the cases that we're talking about here, we went from pre-revenue to, let's say, over $1 million in, it was at least 18 months. And so in that time frame, you're doing so much. There's so many things that marketing is responsible for, and especially when you broaden it into that, member or leader within a commercialization team, you're building out the brand, you're setting up, some credible thought leadership, you're enabling a sales team, you're talking to customers, there's just, to me, it's an exercise of prioritization. And that was one of the things that I got as I got farther along in my career. I started being more insistent about setting priorities and running with those. So like I would set up sprints with my team, and I'd work with the executive team and say, hey guys, yes, there's a massive universe of things that marketing can do right now. There's things that we could do, there's things that we should do, and there's even fewer things that we must do. And so my sprints are going to be around what it is that we must do. And that's what I'm going to get back to you on 2 weeks, and in 2 weeks with what we've done. So that prioritization creates alignment with the executives and also alignment with the team, whether they're contractors or other members that, you're bringing on. But at that point, everybody knows sort of what is going to be, gotten out of that function.
I'm glad you said that, because that's really the biggest challenge I've found in that seat too, because I've been in that seat, right? Which is, there's a million things you could do, which were the ones that you're going to focus on. So having that rigor and that discipline is really key to success. Any surprises that you encountered along the way? I'm sure there was, right? And how did you kind of overcome or kind of work with those? Because, nothing is the same on a daily basis in a startup.
Yeah, I mean, to me, it has been just a steady stream of surprises. I think that's sort of the nature of the gig, right? If there was a playbook or if there was like, a script already written, it would be a different kind of thing. I have a point of view about PR's role in startups that not everybody agrees with. And it's funny because the first big client we got at my first startup was a result of a press release that I wrote that got into the hands of Chevrolet's agency of record. And they called us up. They called me. My contact information was on the press release. And they became our biggest customer, right? So a press release got us Chevy. I think that in terms of surprises, what I would like to say about that is that I believe, my point of view is that you ought to budget for experimentation. You literally ought to have that, because guess what? Everybody has experience with marketing, either as a consumer or in business or whatever. And you're going to get, in some cases, bombarded with suggestions. And some of them are going to be awesome and some of them are going to be terrible. But I really do think that in terms of surprise, you ought to cultivate surprise in some way by having a budget for experimentation, right? There's a lot of things that you can do and try. And you ought to try and prompt that, because you'll find some things that, will bring results. And like that press release, my CEO said, I want to do a press release. And I said, all right, I'll get to it. And lo and behold, it brought the biggest account that we had. So that's, you're going to get lots of suggestions and you're going to get lots of opportunities to do things. And it really comes down to focusing those and prioritizing them.
So did you come out with a thumbs up on the PR? Is that a thing we should do for early stage?
I think there is a tendency, at least in my experience, to go to that tool in the tool belt too soon. I think for early stage companies, especially with interesting technologies, I think they're way, way better off developing their own point of view and their own thought leadership activities so that they can have more meaningful conversations with people who are interested in covering that through the media. So to me, it's not a yes or no. I'm not a PR hater. I actually like it, but I just think that people go to it too soon.
Yeah, or they think that PR is, we're going to put out a press release and that's how we get the word out. There's a whole, it's not that straightforward. There's tons of press releases, so it's hard to get traction unless you have a really tight story. I want to go back to something you said though and ask you a second part on that. I agree that it's great advice and smart to build in for experimentation, but how do you do that though when you're starting up and you have very limited resources? Is that something that you maybe tee up while you're still in the conversation stages before you join? Do you try to level set and kind of set expectations? Because I think it's hard for a marketer, to sometimes to argue or say, hey, look, it's not just coin operator. It's not just, hey, just put in a coin and boom, the leads come out. There's one aspect. There's some aspect that's not totally wrong, but there is also experimentation and trial and error. So how do you, what's your advice, for our listeners on how to balance that and how to accomplish that?
I think it's a great point, Alec, and I think I might take it one level higher, which is, if you're going to be the first in function marketing person at a startup, a technology based startup, the number one most important relationship that you're going to have is with the CEO, who's likely a founder or been around in that business for a while. And so whether it's related to marketing budgets or experimentation or whatever tactically with respect to marketing, you've really got to suss out, the collective strengths and weaknesses and blind spots, before you get going. Otherwise, you could be headed towards a place that neither of you want to go. So like having those kinds of conversations and taking the time for those in advance, I really think is important. And if you have someone who's just, not willing to do that, and, you want to have a strategic contribution to the business, then you might not have the best fit. Whereas if you do have those conversations and you do get that going, it actually strengthens the relationship in an early stage that you can build upon going forward. So that is, I think, one of the most important things that you can do. The other thing that I would suss out in those conversations is this somebody who's capable of being a key fixture in the thought leadership development of the business, right? Because not everybody wants to hear from the marketing person. They want to hear from the CEO or the lead technologist or something of that nature. So like sussing that out and having those conversations and taking that time, I think, I didn't know to do that at the beginning of my career, but right now, and I think anybody should be looking for the best possible fit, right? Not just, hey, here's an opportunity, I'm going to take it. So having those kinds of conversations, I spent half my time working with CEOs in technology companies as a result of having that job.
Great advice. I like that.
So when you think about, I think the relationship is really important, right? And hopefully the CEO that you work with is actually bringing you on board as a compliment to them, right? Or a compliment to the organization, because that's what makes you all really, really strong. Talk about it. I'm recalling some of the wins in my career that came from a gelled organization that had a really good relationship between product, marketing, between sales, our CEO, the tech person, et cetera. In the big growth bucket, talk about some examples on how you created some wins in big growth. For me, they came from like big high technology leaps or tech jumps in product, and then a great story that went to market. But maybe it's different for you. How about some big growth story?
The fastest I've grown is from 0 to 15 million in 3 years. And that was with Strand Diagnostics. And we had a novel DNA based test for prostate biopsies. And we learned pretty early that we had created something that the practitioners valued and that they wanted as part of their routine care. And once that happened, it was like, okay, we have a nice little fire started here. How do we throw gas on that? And I went from a pretty broad range of responsibilities to really heavy brand messaging and sales enablement on that. Like I was just feeding the sales force and helping them get up to speed with our messaging and handling objections and all of the things that maybe a director of sales might be doing. But again, we were still pretty small commercialization team. It was really like I wasn't doing outbound. We had the code cracked, and it was just like, how can we get as much gas as possible to grow this thing as fast as possible? And that required some pretty rigorous focus, to really build the right messaging, which, I mean, it was complex and it was nuanced. So it took time. It was something new and novel. And then it was like, I'm going to enable the sales force with content, We did a ton of events. Live events at that point in time were, dominating. It was, 2010 to 2013. So, that to me was like, at some point in time when you have a company that's starting to hit that knee in the curve of growth, you have to kind of reassess and say, well, this is what got us to this inflection point. Now, what do we need to do to, make it go farther faster? And in our case there, it was build out a sales force and help them leverage marketing to help them be as successful as possible.
In that example, did you know that that was the right model, or did you have to kind of figure out, hey, maybe it's a different channel, maybe it's partners, or it's, whatever? It sounds like maybe you knew that was the right channel.
We did have a partner channel as well that was contributing steadily. What was interesting about that, Alec, is it was almost the same stuff that we had to do as a marketing team for our internal team as for partners. We were educating, we were being visible at events. We were doing those things. I love that question. I haven't even, I have to pause and think about it for a second because, I'm trying to think of what other alternatives we might have pursued. It just seemed obvious. There was so much momentum and so many things happening, so much growth and signups and things like that. It was like, well, let's just rinse and repeat.
Yeah. Yeah. The way you described it made me think that it seemed like that was, it was clear that, hey, this is where we need to pour gasoline. Because I go back to what you were saying in the beginning. It's making me think that when you're joining a startup, there's almost two kind of, there's two modes that you can be in, and you have to kind of tick off on both of them. The first mode is figuring out where to go to market. And then once you figure out, oh, okay, we've got a market, we're going to get some traction here. Then the second mode is figure out, okay, now how do I accelerate? How do I, turn on the engines? And sometimes turning on the engines might require you to think through what's the best way to do that, right? Do we need to do we need to put all our budget into events? Do we need to build out a sales force? Do we need to build out a really, optimal website, with easy sign up and subscription? There's lots of different models for that. And I think but both of those are really important. I don't know, that's just a thought that came to mind as you were describing that.
Yeah. And I mean, don't discount luck either, right? I mean, the faster you get to that realization, it's almost exponential how much better off you're going to be, right? So how can you get to that fast?
How do we get lucky? Can you it's better to be lucky than to be good, right?
Well, I'd even flip that back a little bit because you have to see the opportunity sometimes ahead of time, right? And
Yeah.
great timing can work with you on a new technology, right? If you have a novel concept and you're in market, that's awesome, right? But it's also a great marketer's ability to see, what's the area I'm going to place the bet in, right? And if it is a new technology and nobody else has it, wow, that's like a great problem to have. But sometimes it requires you to pick a path before you know. And I think that's where a lot of intuition and learning and talking to the customer comes into play.
For sure. For sure. And I mean, I also, none of the things that I attached to in this journey, it wasn't like I was just sitting there doing it by myself. When you're the first marketer hired, you're working with other people in other disciplines. And like, if you joined a company with a good culture, which is another thing that I would advise people to try and suss out, you're likely to have conversations with people that have, shared values, yes, but also different perspectives and different experiences, and can be, if the culture is right, you can have good, healthy conversations, challenging conversations about where you're going, and ultimately get to a better answer by virtue of leveraging those people.
Yeah. Mike, were you the first marketing hire for most of these?
Every single one. Yeah.
Okay. What advice do you have when you're that first marketing hire? because there's so many questions that come into when you're that, like, where do I spend? How do I hire more? What tips would you give to other first hire marketers on how to build out the marketing function?
There's a narrowing function that, it's not like there's a ton of, there are, but there aren't so many marketing tactics that you can just, try out. One, I mean, you've got to have you've got to have a brand, and you've got to have a brand story and an understanding of who you are, your mission, your vision, your values, the foundational kind of stuff, right? And if that's not there, then great, you get to do that work. And hopefully you're good at that, because that's a huge platform that the business will be built upon. This is a tough question, Alec, because like I do feel like 25 years and 4 companies into this, I can kind of blink and be confident that like some of the initial approaches are going to be sound. They may not be effective, but they're sound, right? They're like, okay, I'm not ready to turn on SEO yet because I don't have any domain authority, because I don't have any thought leadership, right? So you can rule in and rule out certain approaches based on, again, are you a vertical or are you horizontal? Like that's a big branch in the logic tree for me in terms of what I reach for first. So, ultimately in a self-serving fashion, I'd say call the consultant that's done it a few times and let me help you, sort that out. Don't go into it on your own. Get some help. Find a way to, branch to get that either in a conversation or a mentor or hiring someone. Get another perspective if you haven't done it before, because you'll avoid mistakes that I made in the first ones that where I was. I'm still making them.
So that's kind of my next question really is, I've been in this seat as well. And I think your advice on getting a growth consultant is the right one, right? And I'm in several right at the moment, actually, thinking through, where did you put your resources at this stage of the organization? And it can vary. Talk to some of the mistakes that you see in early stage companies that can really make or break an organization. And what are the watch outs?
Yeah, we talked about PR and sort of the desire to kind of do that sooner than I think you should. That sort of stands out as one. Other places where people get caught up, I think, is probably even misunderstanding what brand is. Like, most people are like logo, tagline, colors, check. And, you can do that. And some companies have been successful with that, but not really looking foundationally at what the business is about, what it stands for, what it's aimed at, what its point of view is. I mean, those things are really, really important as you're building out a business. Those just don't happen overnight. The best brand in my experience was working with M&M Mars. They did everything right. And at the time that I was working with them, and I was just so curious as to like, well, how did this get there? They've been around for a long, long, long time, and they invested a lot of resources in brand. So I think one, not investing enough in brand, but also not understanding brand and what its role is in shaping an organization, both as a externally facing, but also internally as a culture developing tool and an employer type tool.
Absolutely. Like the employer brand is like way low on the totem pole for some of the companies, and they don't realize what a resource that is in helping to build that overall brand in total, right? I've seen that myself many, many times. I've also seen a focus sometimes on a logo versus the product that we're bringing to market sometimes, right? It's right. Like, mm-hmm. If we're going to market for the very first time, we have to have a sound product market fit for this device or this technology or what have you that we're bringing to market. And the logo comes after we've, teased out that work, I think, right?
It should. And I think that, if the work is done well, the benefit is that the perception is you're punching above your weight class, right? You appear bigger, more sophisticated than you maybe are, and that gets you to a different class of investor or a different profile of customer or a different type of advisor, right? It does matter. And I think it's a place where people can invest. Another one that I don't see companies doing enough is going in leveraging CRM sooner. And this is essential in the deep tech practice that I'm doing is like, you're at this for a long period of time. You're having tons of conversations in tons of different areas. And if you centralize that, and if you use that as a source of truth, and if you use that as a way to connect people in the organization who are remote or doing different things or in different, if you've got, HubSpot CRM is free. You can put your entire team on it. And if you're using it and pouring the findings and the conversations and the tasks and things like that at the early stage, there's this flywheel that can happen of productivity and of institutional knowledge.
I like that, Mike. And you've covered, with that, you've covered now, both the tech side, some of the strategy, some of the execution. I think it's a great mix of advice and perspective. And so I really like that. If people wanted to find out more about you or kind of get some help from you, where can they get more information and get in touch with you?
Yeah, thank you both for the chance to go down memory lane here and hopefully help some people. I do have a business started for a consultancy. It's called Hard Tech CMO. And so you can reach me at mike@hardtechcmo.com.
That's
that would
great.
Be great. So if I'm looking for my next CMO for the startup, I'm calling you up, Mike. That's a brilliant idea. And, it's certainly needed. I can speak to some of the startups I've worked out. I think that work and that focus on commercialization is going to be really needed in the marketplace. So thanks so much.
Thanks for joining us.